You're scrolling through retirement calculators at 2 in the morning, and every single one is telling you the same thing. You need $1.5 million, $2 million to be safe, maybe $3 million if you want to actually enjoy yourself. And you're sitting there thinking, I'm 32 years old making $60,000 a year. I'll be dead before I hit that number. Here's what nobody tells you. That number is wrong, not a little wrong. Catastrophically, keep you working until you're 70 wrong. The actual minimum amount you need to retire early is so much lower than you think that when I show you the math, you're going to wonder why everyone's been lying to you. And more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to hit that number in the shortest time possible, because understanding the target is useless if you don't know how to reach it fast. Let's start with where that terrifying $1 million plus number comes from, because once you understand the logic, you'll see exactly where it breaks down. The retirement industry loves the 4% rule. It goes like this. Take your annual expenses, multiply by 25, and boom, that's your retirement number. If you spend $40,000 a year, you need $1 million. Spend $60,000, you need $1.5 million. The math is clean, it's simple, and it's been drilled into everyone's head for decades. Here's the thing they're missing. That 4% rule was designed for a very specific type of retirement. Traditional retirement, the kind where you stop working at 65, never earn another dollar, and hope your money lasts 30 years while you play golf and take cruises. It's built for someone who's completely done with income generation and wants maximum safety because they're never going back to work. But early retirement is a completely different game. When you retire at 35 or 40 or even 45, you're not entering a 30-year spending phase. You're entering a flexible, dynamic period where you have options. You can do part-time work you actually enjoy. You can start a small business. You can take on consulting projects. You can move to a lower cost of living area. You have decades of earning potential ahead of you, even if you never want a traditional job again. The 4% rule treats you like you're fragile and inflexible, when the reality is you're probably more capable and adaptable at 40 than most people are at 65. And here's where it gets really interesting. The 4% rule is based on the absolute worst-case scenario in market history. It's designed to survive if you retire right before a massive market crash and never adjust your spending. It's the financial equivalent of building a bunker that can withstand a direct nuclear strike when you live in a neighborhood where the biggest threat is someone stealing your Amazon packages. Yes, it's safe. It's also massive overkill for most people. Research from multiple sources shows that a slightly higher withdrawal rate, something closer to 4.5 or even 5%, has historically worked for longer retirement periods when you're willing to make small adjustments. And when you're retiring early, you have the ultimate adjustment mechanism built in. Your ability to earn money if things get tight. You're not locked into a fixed withdrawal rate for 30 years. You can be strategic, you can be flexible, you can respond to market conditions instead of just hoping they work out. But here's the kicker. Even if we stick with the conservative 4% rule, the minimum number you actually need is way lower than what the calculators tell you, because those calculators are making a huge assumption about your spending. They're assuming you need to maintain your current lifestyle forever. They're assuming your expenses at 40 are going to be the same as your expenses at 65. And that assumption is where everything falls apart, because the lowest amount you need to retire early isn't based on replacing your current income. It's based on covering your actual minimum expenses. And those two numbers are wildly different. Let's get specific about what we're actually talking about here, because the term early retirement means completely different things to different people. And that confusion is costing you years of unnecessary work. For some people, early retirement means never working another day and living like they're on permanent vacation. For others, it means having the freedom to only do work they actually enjoy without worrying about the paycheck. And here's the truth. The second definition requires way less money than the first, and it's also way more realistic and sustainable. When I talk about the minimum amount for early retirement, I'm talking about reaching financial independence. The point where your investments cover your basic living expenses and you never have to take a job you hate just to pay the bills. You might still work. You might start a business or do freelance projects or teach pottery classes. But you're doing it because you want to, not because your landlord is threatening to evict you. That's the real definition of retirement for most people under 50. It's not about doing nothing. It's about having total control over your time. Now here's where the math gets interesting. Your lifestyle costs in early retirement are probably going to be dramatically lower than your current expenses, and I'm not talking about eating ramen and living in your parents' basement. I'm talking about the natural expense reductions that happen when you're not working a traditional job. Think about what you spend money on right now specifically because you work. Commuting costs, work clothes, eating out for lunch because you don't have time to pack, expensive coffee to stay awake during meetings, paying for convenience because you're too exhausted to cook, therapy to deal with your boss. Okay, maybe that last one is just me, but you get the point. Research shows that people who retire early typically see their expenses drop by 20 to 30% just from eliminating work-related costs, and that's before making any intentional lifestyle changes. But let's go deeper. What are your actual minimum expenses? Not what you spend now, not what you think you need to be happy. What do you absolutely need to cover to survive and maintain a decent quality of life? Housing, food, healthcare, basic utilities, transportation. That's really it. Everything else is optional. And I'm not saying you should eliminate everything optional. I'm saying you need to know the difference between your baseline survival number and your comfortable lifestyle number, because that baseline is your real retirement target. Let's use a real example. Say you currently spend $50,000 a year. You've got a car payment, you eat out 3 times a week, you have a gym membership you use twice a month, and you subscribe to every streaming service known to humanity. Your baseline expenses, the stuff you actually need, might be $30,000. Housing, basic food, healthcare, internet, phone, and transportation. That's it. The other $20,000 is lifestyle inflation and convenience spending. And here's the thing. If your baseline is $30,000, your retirement number using the 4% rule is $750,000. Not $1.25 million. $750,000. You just cut your target by 40% simply by understanding what you actually need versus what you currently spend. All right, let's do the actual math, because this is where theory becomes a specific dollar amount you can actually work toward. The formula is stupidly simple, but most people mess it up by plugging in the wrong numbers. Your FIRE number equals your annual expenses multiplied by 25. That's it. That's the whole formula. But the magic is in defining what annual expenses actually means for you. Start with your current spending. Pull up your bank statements for the last 6 months and calculate your average monthly spending. Multiply that by 12. Let's say you get $50,000. Now here's where you need to be brutally honest with yourself. Go through that $50,000 line by line and ask yourself 3 questions about every expense. First, is this directly related to working my current job? If yes, you can probably eliminate it or reduce it significantly. Second, is this something I actually value, or is it just habit and convenience? Be ruthless here. That gym membership you haven't used since February doesn't count as something you value. Third, would I still spend this money if I had unlimited free time? Because here's the thing, when you're not working 40+ hours a week, you have time to cook instead of ordering takeout. You have time to fix things instead of paying someone else. You have time to find free entertainment instead of spending money out of boredom. Let's say after that analysis, you determine your actual retirement expenses would be $35,000 a year. Multiply that by 25. Your FIRE number is $875,000, not $1.5 million, not $2 million, $875,000. And if you're willing to be more aggressive and accept a 4.5% withdrawal rate instead of 4%, which research shows is perfectly reasonable for early retirees who maintain flexibility, you multiply by 22 instead of 25. That brings your number down to $770,000. You just saved yourself over $700,000 in required savings compared to the traditional retirement calculator, and you did it without sacrificing anything that actually matters to you. But here's what really blows people's minds. That number includes 0 additional income. It assumes you never earn another dollar for the rest of your life. But the reality is, most early retirees do some kind of work they enjoy. Maybe you make $10,000 a year doing freelance projects. Maybe you rent out a room on Airbnb. Maybe you sell stuff you make on Etsy. If you can generate even $10,000 a year doing things you actually enjoy, your required portfolio drops to covering $25,000 in expenses. Multiply that by 25, and your FIRE number is now $625,000. That's less than half of what the traditional retirement calculators were telling you. The math isn't complicated. It's just that nobody's showing you the right way to calculate it. Now that you know your actual target number, let's talk about how to make it even lower, because every dollar you shave off your retirement expenses is $25 less you need to save. This is the part where small changes create massive results, and most people completely overlook these strategies because they're too focused on the earning side of the equation. The biggest lever you have is housing. For most people, housing is 30 to 40% of their expenses. If you're spending $2,000 a month on rent or a mortgage, that's $24,000 a year. Multiply that by 25, and your housing alone requires $600,000 in your portfolio. But here's where it gets interesting. What if you could cut that in half? Move to a lower cost area, downsize to a smaller place, buy a duplex and rent out the other unit, house hack by renting out rooms. Suddenly your housing cost is $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year, and you just reduced your FIRE number by $300,000. $300,000. That's probably a decade of savings for most people. And you did it by making one strategic decision about where and how you live. The second strategy is geographic arbitrage. And this is where early retirement gets really fun. You don't have to stay in the expensive city where your job is located because you don't have that job anymore. You can move to a place where your dollar goes 2 or 3 times further. I'm not talking about moving to a developing country, although that's an option. I'm talking about moving from San Francisco to Austin, from New York to Raleigh, from Seattle to Boise. Your quality of life often goes up while your expenses drop by 30 to 50%. If you're currently spending $40,000 a year and you move somewhere your expenses drop to $25,000, you just reduced your FIRE number from $1 million to $625,000. That's a $375,000 difference just from changing your zip code. Healthcare is the third big one, and it's the expense that terrifies most people about early retirement. But here's what nobody tells you. If your income is low enough, you qualify for substantial subsidies on the Affordable Care Act exchanges. When you're retired and living off portfolio withdrawals, you have way more control over your taxable income than you think. You can structure your withdrawals to keep your income low enough to qualify for premium tax credits. People are out here paying $800 a month for health insurance when they could be paying $200 with the same coverage, just by understanding how the system actually works. That's $7,000 a year in savings. Multiply by 25, that's $175,000 less you need in your portfolio. The fourth strategy is optimizing your spending on the things that actually matter to you while ruthlessly cutting everything else. This isn't about deprivation. It's about intentionality. Maybe you love traveling, but you don't care about having a new car. Great. Drive a 10-year-old Toyota and take 3 international trips a year. Your total spending might be the same, but your quality of life is way higher because you're spending on what you actually value. Here's the part that nobody prepares you for, and it's the reason why some people hit their FIRE number and then keep working anyway. The psychological shift from saving money to spending it is harder than the actual math of getting there. You spend years, maybe a decade or more, training yourself to save aggressively. Every dollar that goes into your investment account feels like progress. Every dollar you spend feels like you're moving backward. And then one day you hit your number, and suddenly you're supposed to flip a switch and start pulling money out. It feels wrong. It feels dangerous. It feels like you're sabotaging everything you built. This is where people make their biggest mistake. They hit their FIRE number and then they don't retire. They keep working just one more year to build a bigger buffer, and then another year, and then another. And before they know it, they've worked 5 extra years they didn't need to work. All because they couldn't make the mental shift from accumulation to withdrawal. I'm not saying you should retire the second you hit your number if it doesn't feel right. I'm saying you need to understand that the fear you're feeling isn't based on math. It's based on psychology, and psychology can be managed. The key is reframing what withdrawal actually means. You're not destroying your portfolio. You're using it for exactly what you built it for. Think about it like this. You wouldn't buy a car and then refuse to drive it because you're worried about putting miles on it. You wouldn't buy a house and then sleep outside because you don't want to wear down the carpet. The whole point of building wealth is to use it to create the life you want. Your portfolio isn't a trophy. It's a tool. Here's what helps. Start practicing withdrawal before you actually retire. If your FIRE number is $750,000 and you're at $600,000, start taking small amounts out to cover specific expenses. Take $1,000 out to fund a weekend trip. Pull out $2,000 to replace your dying laptop. Get comfortable with the mechanics of withdrawal while you're still earning income. It takes the edge off the psychological fear because you're proving to yourself that the portfolio doesn't explode the second you touch it. The other thing that helps is understanding sequence of returns risk, which sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. The danger isn't withdrawing money. The danger is withdrawing money during a market crash in your first few years of retirement. If you retire and the market immediately drops 30% and you're pulling out 4% every year, you're selling assets at depressed prices and your portfolio might not recover. But here's the thing. You can manage this. Keep 2 years of expenses in cash or bonds. If the market crashes, you live off that cash instead of selling stocks at a loss. You give your portfolio time to recover. This is called a cash buffer, and it's the difference between a withdrawal strategy that works and one that fails. The final piece is giving yourself permission to adjust. Early retirement isn't a one-way door. If you retire and realize 6 months in that you're bored out of your mind, you can go back to work. If the market crashes and you need to generate some income, you can pick up freelance projects. If your expenses are higher than you calculated, you can make cuts or earn more. The flexibility is the whole point. You're not locked into anything. You're just giving yourself options. And once you internalize that, the psychological shift becomes way easier, especially if you follow what I teach in this next video.